Hi, and welcome to another video on SQL. In this tutorial, I'm going to review the is null and is null not null functions, as well as the fnull, isNull, coalesce, and NVL functions. So let's start. As you can see, the table that I have open here actually have some null values, right, on the GDP column, date column, generation column, specific area and region. So what we're going to do is I'm going to first give you an example of is null and is not null functions and explain to you what the syntax is and what it does. So is null function actually works with the with the where clause, and what you're doing is you're telling SQL to query uh, any data where a certain column in that data, or a query any table where a certain column in that table has no value. So how we do it is we're going to add the where clause here and say, give me everything from the world indicator table where, right, where the GDP is null. So you could say, oh, why not? Why can't we do the equal operator, right? And then say null. But will that work? Let's see if it'll work or not. It will not work because what's happening is um, it's looking for any value that has the null written, any value with, or any value that has this character null in it. And let's say even if we put it in a single code and make it a character data type and run it, see, get the same thing. It gives us this time it actually gives a syntax error to say that it's invalid input. So when you put the NULL, it automatically uh, SQL automatically recognizes it as a null value. But then when you use it with an equal operator, you're actually telling SQL to look for anything that has a value null on it. But that's not how it works, or that's not how it is. When you have a null value itself is indicative of absence of a value. Pretty much these cells mean there's no value in it. So when you double click on it, as you can see, there's nothing on it. There's an empty cell. So how can you use the equal operator, right, to look for a null value while there's no value on GDP cell? Therefore, we use the is null function. So the is null function actually is asking SQL to look for the null, and we specify it with the is. So and is an important operator here because you're actually calling in null not as a character, not as a numeric, not as a date or any type integer data. You're just bringing it as its own data type called null. So when you run this, you're actually going to see that. Um, I'm sorry, I forgot to put the name of the column for the. So when you run this, as you can see, it goes and it queries for you that given column where the value is null. And although it shows us as null, this null is actually indicative of absence of any value, any data on that relative cell. So that's how you do it. Let's say we're going to actually do the opposite now, right? And instead of only querying or filtering for null value data, we're actually going to ask SQL to actually exclude nulls and only give us only give us the records that were the GDP column. We call the GDP column in, and where the GDP column has value, and excluding null. So same thing. We're going to do the same thing, except that we're going to change it to is not. So as you saw, that when I type is not, it adapts. Yeah, it adopts this color. It tells me that SQL is starting to recognize it as a function. And lastly, put the null. And you're going to see that now we are going to exclude null from our table query. There you go. And those values are now gone, since we did the filter based on GDP. So any record, any line of record, any line of rows that has a GDP of null will be now excluded from this filter. So that was the is not null. That was the first portion of this tutorial. Now let's look at the second portion of the tutorial, where we're going to look at actual if null, is null, coalesce, and NVL functions. So the fnull functions goes by many names and many attributes depending on what language you're actually using, right? So we use fnull, but and you know, we can use fnull if we're using, let's say, MySQL. You can use fnull if you're using SQL Server. But if you're using, let's say, Microsoft Access, then you may need to combine f with is null, and then then build your expression based off of that. If you're using Oracle, then you may need to use what we call NVL. So it all really depends on the language, or it really depends on the environment, or on your database server that you're using. So pgadmin, this is talking to a Postgres SQL server. So we can either use if null, or we can also use the coalesce. So pretty much what we're going to do is we're going to what all of these functions have the same does the same work, which is pretty much to tell SQL that display on display certain values, or display value based off of the criteria if it's null. If it's null, then display me something. If it's not null, then display me something else, if it makes sense. So let me just run this one more time and get all of the data, including the nulls, as you can see. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell SQL that return, let's say, an alternative value when something is null, let's say in region. So we're going to start with saying select, let's say, country ID, or actually we can select everything, and then say select everything, and then say if null or coalesce, then open the parentheses, and then give your criteria and your expression. So say if the region, so coalesce itself meaning if null. If null, if the region was null, then actually instead of null, just say no data available. So return that value for me. And then maybe call that uh, as let's say updated region. There you go. And then the name of the table is going to be world indicator. And then run it. And there you go. You're going to see that the region, right, where we have the null value, there's a new column added here, which is updated region, where the value, the return value that we assign to this null value is no data available. So what if you would like to actually change this to null itself, to the new value itself, instead of having a new column? So same thing, except that um, we need to put the region name. So we can go and start by saying country ID, and let's say country name, and then region. And this time let's not just put region. Let's just put let's use the fnull or coalesce, and then put the region, and then say no data available for this variable. And yeah, let's just not even give it a new name, just keep it the way it is. And then lastly, let's assign what table it should do this. You should perform this function on. Go ahead and run it. And there you go. You're going to see that um, our region now actually changed to no data available for this variable. And because we use Coalesce, it's automatically getting the Coalesce function as a label for it. So we might as well just change this to as region and rerun it. And there you go. So now we have all of the data and also the region which was null for the XXXX country is now changed to no data available for this variable. So that's one of the uses of an fnull function, or any of its variety, like I said, depending on what you really want to use it for. And you can actually uh, build on this in ways that you can add additional expressions and add like multiple alternative values using the functionality of if null, is null, or coalesce and NVL functions. And fnull is very common in Tableau calculation fields. You would see that is null as well. Is null mostly like returns a dichotomy of true and false values. Uh, Coalesce and fnull values, or have can work with MySQL and SQL Server environments. So just make sure that you know that all of these actually do the same function, do the same work, except that they their syntax, or maybe their applicability and also their syntax can differ, would need to be changed depending on what SQL environment you're actually applying them on. This is it. The two important topic of is and is not null, and if null, is null, coalesce, and NVL functions were covered here. And I did not cover the NVL or the if appended with is null. They work more with Microsoft. NVL works with Oracle, and if with IsNULL works more, has applicability with Express functions and Microsoft Access. So play with it and see how you can use them. As long as you know what is the concept, or how you can make use of what is the concept of if nulls, how you can make use of it, how to apply it, where to apply it. Those are really easy. It just needs some experiment and some research. Thank you for your time.